Yeah.
So today, I'm sure. Wow, we got a lot of people here today with us. I wonder if everyone is on our side with this or not.
Everyone
On our side.
Yeah,
Everyone
I'm
is
curious
here.
to see what'll happen. Everyone is here. But yeah, today we are talking about Ivy style, both the aesthetic, a little bit. I mean, we've talked about Ivy style in the past, but we're talking about the aesthetic and the website and / Facebook group.
What is okay? Well, first,
kinda,
we got to remember. I'm putting this out there because I want to make sure we talk about it. We got to talk about Christian Chenswald, whatever his weird
Trenswald. Yeah, we'll talk about
his weird
that.
Jordan Peterson knockoff website.
Yeah,
Oh my
we'll
God.
get in.
Oh,
We'll get on that.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, which I doubt, I doubt people don't know, but Ivy style is a look worn by university students, specifically the Ivy League schools, popularized in the late 50s and early 60s, and that's kind of what this website's been about. It's kind of what most people, when they dress Ivy or dress maybe kind of preppy, those terms are kind of interchangeable depending on, personally to me, the level of formality and the boldness of those pieces. I know the Gentleman's Gazette has a video based on like what's preppy, what's Ivy, and what's trad. I don't think it's exactly
That's
that
totally
accurate,
Right.
because I think I get inspiration from Ivy, but I look at like the 30s Ivy, which might be called trad to some people. You know what I mean? So, Aparoli Spritzioli said, did I just log in time for Chensfold's Warrior Monk slander?
Oh,
Yeah,
we'll
you
get
did.
there. We're
You
getting
came in
there.
at the exact right moment.
You're in the pit.
But yeah, we've talked about Ivy style before. Probably on the biggest scale is during the demise or the bankruptcy of Brooks Brothers, right?
Mhm.
And that, we didn't get into exactly the Brooks
Rest in
Brothers
power.
look on Ivy, but we kind of did reference
power.
it. Like not a lot of regular people wear OCBDs in that way. People don't wear sack jackets, and of course Brooks Brothers had to modernize, especially when they were acquired, like in the late 2000s, I think. You saw a lot more 2-button short jackets, slim fits, alpha size stuff, compared to the revival or the neo heyday in like the 80s and
Where
and
everything
early
was
90s
beta
and stuff.
sized. There's a bunch of weak-kneed Ivy League pansies.
It's
wore 'em.
cuck size now,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's what it is.
Yep. Specifically
Yeah.
cuck size.
sizes.
Is that
Yeah.
is that verbatim?
That's verbatim.
actually-
Yep. Yeah.
When you walk
Yeah.
into a Brooks Brothers now, the salesman slaps your ass and he's like, "Where the fuck is your girlfriend, pussy?"
I'm gonna fuck your
Welcome to
wife.
Brooks Brothers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm taking what's mine.
exactly.
Um,
And then you
And
work
then
at
after
Brooks
he
Brothers.
recommends the Joe Rogan experience to you.
yeah.
Yeah, guys, I was
It's really
traumatized. I had to
smart.
say all this
Trust
stuff.
me, it's really
Yeah.
smart. Oh God. But yeah, no, I think I don't know. When did we get into Ivy style, Spencer? Because I think you were kind of into it before I did, right?
Yeah,
You-
I
you
mean,
kind
I
of-
like I
'cause you
was
wore
like I
60s
tried to
stuff,
I
like-
tried to turn you on to Ivy stuff, and you're like, "No, I'm not into
I-
this." And then
I
like a year
remember
later,
that.
then you were
specifically
into this.
there was one story that I think we've talked about on the podcast or something where I was like, it was before I started working at Banana Republic. Me and Spencer and I were just hanging out at South Coast Plaza, and I
Eating
really
abs.
wanted to buy a modern suit because I was about to graduate college. I needed like a blue suit, and I'm just looking around, and at J. Crew, this was like fall winter time. There was a really great 3-roll too. I think back in those days, right? I think it was like an older that they kind of made like a Wallace and Bar, like a very classic design, but it was a kind of a vibrant
It was like
blue.
it was like a blue patch pocket corduroy 3-piece suit.
Jesus
and Frank
Christ.
is like, you should buy that, and I'm like,
Is that
no,
part of the Wes Anderson collection.
it could have been, and it's like at the time I don't know why. I think I was just kind of just safe,
Well, I think,
and I think
it was like you were looking for a practical suit, and also I think you were saying it's like I'm not going to buy a corduroy suit because that's not a 4-season suit.
yeah, that's always been a thing, right? Like that's why I got it, but I did like cotton suits, and it was also like J. Crew suits are like $750, right, or $650, something like that. Like the jacket's $300
With the vest,
or
I think it would be
something.
about like $750 or at least $7.
Yeah, something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Yeah, but I don't know how it changed. Obviously, Spencer, as we've said before, it's a little bit harder for Spencer to find like 30s and 40s stuff in his size in good condition. And so for me, as a guy who was like smaller, 38 regular, there was, a lot of other guys in vintage were my size. So, when they decided to give something up, like I would buy it from them. And so I never had to approximate the look. Like Spencer would wear 50s and 60s jackets with like, a custom spear point collar, 30s foulard. But obviously, and he would say, well, that's what like Ivy League students would wear, right? Because it's a very trad, look or whatever. And, with a lot of things, Ivy just kind of took me finding the relevance in my attire, right? And when I got like, closer to the end of college, when I started the blog and everything, and I got more into classic menswear, the Armory, I'm like, okay, I can't wear my 30 suits to class. Like that's off the table. But I also can't wear my like H&M, Forever 21, what else? Like Zara suits, because there's something wrong with that too, to approximate this Armory look. And then I would see around that time, Dick Carroll was joined the Armory. And my friend Ryan Cecil, the cartoonist, said like, hey, yeah, Dick Carroll's a great guy. Like they've been friends for a while because of, the illustration circles and everything. And I was just fascinated by, this Ivy League look, and of, no offense to Spencer, but I got to see it like more kind of lived in, because, Spencer and I would talk about before that.
I also didn't have any real like Ivy stuff. I didn't have like a 3-roll-2 sack jacket or whatever. I was just wearing like, button-down collars and like striped ties because that's what I had.
Yeah, and so I was seeing it on them, and then seeing Taylor Cade, because Mark Cho started to bring Taylor Cade around 2015, 2016 to the Armory, New York for the first time, and I'm like, damn, this is really good. And I just started looking it up, and for those of you who aren't really into the vintage thing, the Brooks Brothers sack suit, which has had very minimal changes from like the 1920s to like the
1910s to the 1970s. It was the 1910s to the 1970s.
Right.
Yeah. I meant like in a generic sense. Like I think the closer one is like 20s-ish, like later on. But the point is, like, the vintage people would say if you wanted like a classic suit that you could get in kind of any era, you could get that Brooks Brothers 3-roll too, because all you need then is just to wear a spear point collar and like a foulard tie or bold tie, whatever, and you'll approximate a vintage look. So that was like my gate. I'm like, okay, so I started looking at that, started looking at Southwick 3-roll-2 suits, and I'm like, oh, this makes sense. This is really cool. It's like natural shouldered. It looks like the Italian style jackets, the ring jackets. Obviously the lapels are different, the button width is different, but it was away from like, okay, I'm still dressing vintage, because a big thing for me was to differentiate myself from like overly modern stuff. And it was just interesting. And then all of a sudden I started to like look at a lot more inspiration, and finding out that this is Ivy style, reading Amitora in like 2016. Spencer bought Take Ivy. I bought Take Ivy a couple of years later. And of course Spencer has a bunch of like 60s inspiration stuff that he would show me. And so, yeah. And then, again, when we found out that the Brooks Brothers sack suit hadn't really changed, and of course also a lot of other makers made sack suits back in the 20s and 30s. Like that wasn't just a Brooks Brothers thing only.
Yeah, I mean, like that was like, that was the case throughout time, throughout history. Brooks Brothers,
exactly,
the sack suit,
right? And like obviously J Press against Southwick. Even like I'm sure we've seen like Hart Schaffner marks. There's like the sack model. In old tailoring catalogs, right? So for me, it was like, oh, okay, so like this is a thing I could do. And if you don't like, I don't want to wear a spread collar shirt. I still don't own any spread collar shirts. But the OCBD with the proper roll has that same effect as like a spear point collar. It's interesting. It draws attention to the neckline and the neck area. Looks really cool. If it's done right, because I think a lot of modern OCBDs are a little too weird. Like especially like the Armory ones, or the ones that you see on button down collar polos. Those are a little too not Ivy to me. But yeah, eventually I kind of got into it, and my approach has always been like what a 30s student would wear, which I guess is just kind of trad, because striped shirts, knit ties, and foulards were worn for years, And then mixing and matching kind of makes it Ivy in my own eyes. But what I think for the purposes of this conversation is that Ivy technically refers to the 50s and 60s, where you get a lot of military surplus chinos, the ones that they washed and shrank, and so they hiked up because they wanted to clean them, right? So they washed them in hot water and stuff like that, right? Or they raw hemmed them. They wore them with jeans. They wore white socks and loafers, ratty loafers that were falling apart. OCBDs, because those were like sports shirts, and they're Oxford, and plenty of roll and blazers and such like that. And that look was very popular again in the 50s, 60s, and you see it later on too, right? But that's
when
typically
people
what
talk about Ivy style. They're usually talking about the specific period from the mid 50s to the mid 60s.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. Like that's kind of like what it is, because there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into it. Because it's not just wearing a blazer, right? It's like there's all the stuff that goes into it. Like
there's
like
if you go to the website, if you go to the Facebook group, you will find there are a lot of so-called rules to this.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of where the Facebook stuff gets into, and we'll get into that in a second. But I don't know, what do you guys think about Ivy style? Maybe we can go down the list here, and maybe what it means to you guys. So Ivan,
yep,
tell us what you think about Ivy, and where and if you draw inspiration from it.
Well, before, so I got into the Ivy style because of the Discord. When I was posting. When I was posting my daily fits, you guys were kind of describing it as Ivy, and I was like, and I already knew about Ivy, but I didn't get into it at the time, because before that I was dressing like 1930s everyday birdie rooster, that sort of thing, and so then I discovered Ivy through the Discord, and I was like, okay, well this can kind of work for me, because I am a college student, and how like you said, Ethan, I can't wear the 30 suits to college, so Ivy style is sort of that bridge way from casual college style and tailored menswear. So that's how I got into it.
No, I completely agree, because I think Spencer and I, again, hanging out with vintage circles early on. Spencer and I definitely gravitated to a lot more of the more kind of classic combinations. Maybe me a little bit more, because Spencer likes flex and atomic stuff every once in a while. And you heard him earlier; he does like the kind of bold, exploded, plaid, earth tone ties of the mid, the later 40s and early 50s. But for me, and Spencer can back me up, I've always striped spearpoint collars, and foulard ties and rep stripe ties. Those were kind of it, because
you kind of just fell into pre-heyday Ivy, which I would say, it's I think is cooler than heyday Ivy, which is 1930s, the mid 1930s style.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. You look at a lot of the movie stars in the 30s and 40s. A lot of them didn't wear bold ties, and this could also be just a reflection of the times. You look at a lot of Lawrence Fellowes illustrations. Yeah, some of the combinations might be a little bit bold in terms of the tailoring. Wearing crazy Donegal suits, but the shirt and tie combinations are fairly pre Ivy or very similar to Ivy. And so, Ivy. But for a lot of other for a lot of other vintage people at the time, right, they would wear the wolf ties, the Dali ties. So me getting into that one was okay, first off, it's great because no one's looking for the ties I'm looking for, right? Mm-hmm. And not only that, but a lot of guys who like Mark Cho, the Armory guys, and later on Brycelands, they also wore fairly normal ties. So it was a great thing for me to kind of get into again. Like Ivan, I think our style was already kind of there. It's just about making it a little bit more accessible for every day, or kind of bridging the gap, which is why Spencer and I kind of suggest Ivy to a lot of people. That's how I kind of my friend Adam, who has yet to be on the podcast because I really want to get him to talk about his style evolution. But that's kind of a great way to kind of get into it. Really quick before I move on to Jason, Scoop says, where Ivy style wardrobe is more minimalistic. He was talking with his tailor a while back about old houses, and he remember having small closets because people had smaller wardrobes. And Aperoli Spitzioli says that makes a lot of sense. Good. A lot of people who dressed trad or ivy without realizing what they were doing didn't buy clothes often. They would buy once and wear the hell out of it and repair it. That's why frayed Oxfords and patch jackets and all that were so common to the aesthetic. That's exactly true.
People, because it's like there are two things. These people lived in college dorm rooms. And also, like, people, you talk about, like, Ivy clothes, but a lot of these students, like, did not really give a shit about clothes or how they look, and that's, like, the whole point. So, like, fucking college kids today buy, like, one hoodie and wear it every day for, like, 6 months until it falls apart. People were doing the same thing, except it was with Oxford shirts or whatever, because that's the college told them they had to wear that to class.
And I think I remember reading the preppy handbook where it says that like of course preps Ivy, just for the sake of this, wasps and all that kind of thing, put it all together.
There's a wasp.
There's a bee. They said something about like preps are frugal. Like preps have money, but they don't want to show it. Right? They're very frugal, so they hold on to their clothing as much as possible. And obviously, the preppy handbook is like satirical, so maybe it's writing about this very thing where she would notice people would wear the Oxford shirts, the elbow patches on the jackets, like until they fell apart, right? Like that's just kind of how it is. And on the note about the college students just kind of wearing whatever they wanted in Amitora, they say that when Japan kind of got into that, right? They when they did take Ivy, they sent like a crew down there. I mean, they financed it themselves. They're like, hey, we gotta document this, and they were surprised to see how much American students didn't give a shit. Like there was this whole like navy blazer and chinos.
They went in like 1967, and a lot of the Ivy Leagues had gotten rid of the dress code a couple years earlier. So what they were still obsessing over like early 60s and late 50s Ivy stuff with the the sack jackets and everything. And they got there, it's like everyone's just wearing like shorts and like fucking jerseys or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what was really cool about that kind of just like people didn't give a shit, and it's really cool to be stylish with that wardrobe. Again, it was probably more minimalistic. These guys were wearing the same Oxford shirts. Maybe a couple of jackets, couple of chinos and jeans, or Madras every once in a while. But it's very easy, which is why it's great for guys to kind of be put onto it. Jason, why don't you tell us about your thoughts on Ivy and if you have
So I mean, when I think about Ivy and especially the original forms of Ivy, like you guys said, it was a bunch of kids who didn't give a shit. And I've taken that upon myself to add that into my own image of clothing and my own branding and all that, of this whole idea that don't give a shit because everything goes together. Doesn't matter. Right. I have like I have I have a degree in graphic communications and film, so like colors, I've studied color theory, and it all goes together. I'm tired of people telling me look at a color wheel because burgundy and like navy don't go together. Like,
which they do.
All colors go together. Like it. And it's just what I find so cool about Ivy style is this initial idea of just who cares. If you're told to wear something, then you might as well just wear it, and who cares about what it looks like. And that's sort of how the opposite of, especially here in New York City, where like the corporate uniform is like you're told to wear a suit, so they wear the exact suit that they're told to wear, whereas like at my job, I don't have to wear a suit, but I do, and it's the suit that I want. It's a burgundy corduroy suit.
Right.
It's the brown check full suit. It's like that instead of you have to wear a suit, so it's a navy. Got to wear your navy suit from Indochino.
Right.
So it's that same sort of attitude of the original Ivy that I've taken upon to sort of bring it into a modern day interpretation of it, because obviously no one's doing that in college. Like Spencer said, they're buying a hoodie. I did the same thing. It was like I lived in like the same few pieces, and then that was it. And so so I try to take that original idea, the original ideas of Ivy, and bring it into a sort of modern day interpretation, whether that be, wearing these sort of, what preppy people would call like go to hell suits, right, and just making them as a sort of, not really making them into a statement, just making it into what I wear.
Yeah.
You'll see me, as Ludwin he saw me out and about in my burgundy cord suit.
Yeah.
And whereas for some people that's too much. But it's sort of just,
boating blazers are technically Ivy, right?
Right.
Batik jackets are kind of Ivy. Which maybe I'm confusing 60s with Ivy because like there's a lot of overlap with like what was in vogue in the 60s, and a lot of it was influenced by Ivy style. Mm-hmm. David says here that the traditional Ivy, yes, an East Coast thing primarily, which is true. But I mean, there's that book, Hollywood and the Ivy Style, which shows a little bit more of like the West Coast Ivy, and that's kind of like a thing. It's kind of like East and West Coast jazz, right? Like there's that kind of like different interpretations. Obviously, when you look at like the Hollywood stuff or what California people were wearing, like the San Marino Andover shot back in the day near Pasadena, you get like the kind of shorter button-down collars, kind of bolder ones, the batik shirts, madras shirts, and madras shorts and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of personality within Ivy. But again, as we'll talk about later, the groups tend to focus more on the East Coast, very trad, very more plain.
Ivy. And it's sort of it loses that what Ivy really is, and you lose the actual roots of it when it's becomes sort of a cosplaying situation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where it's like, those loafers, they're not Aldens or they're not Weegens, or it's like, I have those lug soled Weegens, right? And it's like, but those aren't the ones that they wore, so that's not Ivy. And I'm like, well, I'm, part of this Ivy uniform is, loafers. I'm wearing penny loafers.
This is what I have.
It's like, you're literally doing the exact thing that these people were sort of rebelling against. You're like, but those aren't the loafers we told you to wear. And I'm like, well, I was told I had to wear loafers, so here I am.
Now who's the fuddy-duddy?
Yeah. Now who's the...
They turned Ivy into a dress code when at first it was bucking it.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Yeah, because I mean that's why they wore they're wearing chinos instead of like proper wool trousers, right? That's like such a big thing there. Mm-hmm. David says maybe you need seasons for real Ivy style. Probably. I mean, maybe that's why California kind of did its own version of it.
That's why the East Coast is the best coast.
Nope.
But it doesn't rhyme. It doesn't rhyme when you say that. When we say West Coast, it rhymes.
Damn it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
They said it all for me. I didn't have to jump in.
Exactly.
South Coast, North Coast.
Sorry, which coast started the country?
I mean, it's a bad country, okay?
Claiming the colonists does not make...
but Jason, which coast had all the gold?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's a great thing.
Gold isn't real anymore, so it doesn't matter.
So that's true, yeah.
Jason, that Donald Trump calls New York his home.
Not anymore. He won't be coming back anytime.
Yeah, Kiyoshi, I didn't fight for the Midwest. I'm sorry.
New York for Donald Trump.
Assist from Kiyoshi. Let's go.
There you go. Well, speaking of Kiyoshi, why don't you tell us about...
You live closer to me than you do them. Don't pick their side.
Why don't you tell us about your experience with Ivy and what you draw from it?
We experienced snow.
Yeah, so we get a lot of that. No, so my thing with Ivy comes from, I guess, starting from when I first got into menswear. It was during like the Tumblr era. So that's when you had this.
We don't fall, we tumble.
A lot of people and I wearing suits and ties, but also like rugby. The Ralph Lauren imprint was kind of big at the time.
Oh, yeah.
There was also kind of almost, we could say, like that rugged Ivy thing from like L being signature that popped up. And there's probably a couple other like Oars and something in Oars. I don't know. There's all these like kind of like neo Ivy brands that kind of popped up, and that was kind of like my foray into it. I kind of latched onto that quite a bit, maybe too heavy, and but I eventually, I talked about this I think a couple while back on stream where my clothing and interest and disinterest in certain styles came with my job at the time. And we're going to get into this, I think, later, but like basically I've kind of felt that the people who wear Ivy now are basically the no fun club, and
not including us.
the normies. People that are the most vocal proponents of it,
right,
and most vocal, most visible, I think are probably the worst ambassadors you could have for Ivy style outside of Japan. And yeah, for me, it's kind of like bummed me out because it's like I don't want to wear this stuff if that's the kind of thing that people like that like to wear.
No offense.
So I'm just kind of like, there are things I will wear that are, I guess you could say, maybe within the Ivy realm. Like I love a black net tie, or I have one of my favorite sport codes is a nice herringbone tweed. But I find myself now deliberately, when I do wear those things, not wanting to wear them in a quote unquote Ivy way. Yeah.
I've had a similar conversation with Ryan as well. Like, with the whole with the alt-right stuff and everything. We talked about this briefly with like the Boogaloos, like very early on in the stream, like when we first started doing this. So yeah, there's an idea that you don't want to associate yourself and dress like those people. But to be fair, those people, other than like the kind of stalwart Ivy style guys who I think they dress pretty well, bar the boringness. The regular guys who aspire to be like those people miss the mark quite a bit.
Yeah, what I was going to say earlier, and I preface this by saying no offense, but I don't think I can say no offense and then follow it up with what I'm about to say. The people who post in Ivy style and Christian Chenswald, whatever, when they look at their outfits and then look at something and take Ivy, do they not see that they don't look cool? Like they don't look good? Because you say that
that
like
social fluency, they're missing it.
I think people that only do like, well, okay, maybe I'm not talking about like the people that like like Oxford cloth button down on Instagram wears Ivy style really great, just like that's pretty pretty straight Ivy.
Straightforward Ivy too,
does like pretty good straightforward Ivy, but the people that post on the Facebook groups, they their fucking 3-roll 2s are like perfectly pressed. And it's like, come on, like, what is the point of this? Like, I don't get it.
I've never pressed any like suit of mine. I literally have never.
Not even Jay.
It's just never. It's just another one of those things where people are trying to dress in a certain way, but they are completely missing the mark, and I don't know how they can't see it.
They're missing the point. Yeah. Well, that's why I think it's like sort of as people like us, where it's like you sort of recontextualizing what Ivy is and can be. If we're sort of in a way quote unquote hijacking it. Just like we're recontextualizing wearing suits casually again. Because like finance bros hijacked that from us. And so it's sort of like we're taking it back. So then it's sort of like we're taking Ivy style back by actually, taking the quote unquote rules of it and then throwing them out the window and just being cool with clothing again. Because the clothing has to serve a function. It just has to look cool.
The most ironic thing with the Ivy style Facebook group is that a very, very large chunk of it is old white boomers who were the Ivy Leaguers of the 1950s and 60s. Like these were the guys who were saying "fuck you" to the old dress codes, and now they're whining about how we're dressing.
I think these were the ones that were more falling into the dress code.
Yeah,
because they're not like cool. You talk to them, interact with them, and you're like, these people were like. They were already reminiscing about, the heyday when they were sort of in it. Because, these people definitely weren't there at that time.
I mean, who...
And if they were the same, fascist.
You know who is a guy that is like an original like Ivy League dresser and still wears the look and looks pretty good is Roy. I don't know his last name, but Roy is what it's like
Roy the guy.
Yeah, but he's like an older guy who went to I don't think he went to an Ivy League university, but he went to school in the 1950s and 60s and wore the Ivy look back then, and a lot of his stuff that he still has is stuff that he bought in like the 60s. And he looks, I mean, it's like he's still like a little bit more like he wears everything like a little bit more pressed than I would prefer, but again, I want everything to look like I just woke up from a nap.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Everything needs to look like I was just sleeping.
He still wears some pretty good stuff.
Yeah. His stuff does lean also kind of prep too, with a lot of the more bolder colors and go to hell stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah. Thank you, Kiyoshi, on that one. Matt, what do you got on Ivy style?
Yeah, it was sort of like my transition between like the dandier kind of stuff and then before the Drake's Neo Ivy, which I think is the superior Ivy, but sort of it was the gateway for me to figure out how to come down from the more dandier place and just how to make it a bit more casual. Not as casual as it would become, but I think I sort of missed the point too at first because I looked at I was sort of in the boat of the people that came to take Ivy and they went to the college campuses. Like their idea of it was that, they're all wearing tailoring. And I was very much in the tailoring mindset. So that's what I wore. I figured it out in like 2018. And then I just started wearing tailoring to school every day and ties and all that stuff because I didn't have a menswear job yet. And I just wanted to dress that way. So I did. But so yeah, I mean, I wore things like OCBDs or tried to, and then with knit ties. Like I understood some of those parts to it, some penny loafers, but and white socks. But I didn't get at that. There's a further step. It's more casual than that. And eventually, I kind of realized it also just made me question. Yeah, just like that was sure they were doing that casual version for then, but it's not just wearing those same tailoring pieces now that it's the time displacement doesn't work. So that made me question what's sort of the Ivy of today. And then because I was still a college student and all that stuff, so you still saw collegiate sweatshirts and I latched onto that, but you might have a slim jogger or you might have sneakers and all that stuff for denim, and just like seeing what sort of the modern version of it is. So that's kind of where I'm trying to lean in now with the more casual stuff, because I do think, it can get a little bit on the cosplay side if you kind of wear what I'm wearing today, which is sort of like a chunky cardigan with military wool pants and then a OCBD reverse green stripe and then a black knit tie. That's a little, that's kind of the old heyday, whereas, you might just get away with wearing some sweatpants and then a crew neck, and that's really all you need, or even shorts and that. So that's kind of, it was so important because it was so important to figure out that Ivy style is like a gateway into dressing more casually, but still dressing up. That's why I love doing those tailored looks. But it was a little overkill, and now I think I'm finding a lot better groove, but still hearkening to some Ivy details, but not like married to that old traditionalist Ivy mindset, which I think is just cancerous.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that distinction, and I think so I see some people are always concerned, like they like Ivy, but they don't want to be a part of that, that ideal whatever world they're referring to, Navy Blazer as they're talking about in the chat right now.
I wouldn't want to be part of any menswear subculture that would have me as a member.
Yeah. You've always said it.
I've always said that.
But I think obviously if you come at it from a different different background, because we're like, I can't speak for everyone here, but I didn't go to a fancy school. I don't have like that.
I'm going to the same school that Christian Chenswald went to.
Oh no!
Oh my god!
He said that He said that the only distinction that our school has is its proximity to Disneyland.
Yeah, well, there you go.
And I'll say, you're wrong, sir. We also have a good baseball team. So,
you might get a baseball Ivy.
Yeah.
Sure.
Is your car Ivy?
Yeah,
you've heard it here first.
We'll get into the whole face, like how they always, how it's kind of like a meme, right? They say is blank Ivy, which I think is sometimes hilarious.
Really quick, I'm going through my copy of Take Ivy, and someone was, earlier in the chat, someone was asking, was the Ivy wardrobe a little bit more minimalistic? Well, if you look at the Take Ivy wardrobe directory, which you can't see because unfortunately it's just a mirror, it's a portal to the wall behind me. But it is not a minimalistic wardrobe. They recommend 14 Oxford shirts. 14.
Nice.
Hell yeah, baby. That's what I'm talking about.
12 pairs of socks. I mean, that's good.
All in different flavors.
I have more than that. All white.
Yeah, let me see what else. More than 3 pairs of shorts. 2 suits, dark and light. Okay, so you guys have to select. You select from the following. You get 2.
Okay.
Herringbone in dark or medium gray, worsted in navy or olive green, sharkskin or flannel in gray. You get 2 of them.
Flannel.
I hate sharkskin.
Okay,
let's
so
go
not
flannel.
that one.
Yeah.
You get 2. Keep in mind. I'd probably do I don't know, gray herringbone and then worsted navy, maybe. That would be my choice.
Yeah.
Probably, I think I'd do the same. The gray flannel, though, is so nice.
That's true.
Depends on the shade of gray flannel.
That's true.
I mean any would work. It's just like the mid-gray works the best,
I mean, it's interesting, to see what is prescribed as Ivy, right? Like there are certain items that we keep talking. Maybe we haven't really fully referred to them, but there's the Oxford shirt, there's like the tennis sweaters, there's like the chinos, white socks. Apparently, only with casual wear.
The anorak,
penny loafers. There's anorak stuff. Anything like.
Let me read the shoe suggestions really quick because they're pretty good.
Okay, go for it.
Shoes, 4 pairs. Cordovan plain toe bluchers or saddle shoes.
Yeah.
PTBs.
In black and brown. Okay, saddle shoes in black and brown. No, thank you. Classic loafers, boat shoes, sneakers, and brown boots. Everything except the saddle shoes is
hell
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, yes. I think and it's there's a lot of personality. I think there, kind of in a sense. I mean, maybe to most people, to like a regular person, it sounds kind of boring. But in execution, there's a lot of fun, as we can see, that you can get from Ivy. And I think there's a lot of what's important is to get inspiration from it. I think the difference between our approach to it and maybe the main or the Ivy mainstream approach to it is that we can dress in menswear and make references to it. And I think some of these references may not be as overt as others. Like I think mine is probably more straightforward Ivy than Jason's, by comparison at least. But then if you compare what I wear to like an Ivy style or a navy blazer guy, it's still going to be you're going to notice some differences there. But yeah, before we'll get into that more in a sec. But like MJ, and how about you? And how are you able to or what, Matt?
I was going to say really quick, one aspect I forgot to say was that I really like the living in aspect of this kind of stuff because I feel like I'm a similar way. I really am not like a polished kind of I mean, I do like the basics of maintenance, but just like, I really prefer that natural patina and just like wearing things in. So kind of that also goes into the Ivy style. I remember that when you guys were talking about it, so I just want to throw that in there. But MJ.
Thank you.
MJ, go for it. What do you feel about Ivy and how do you approach it?
Well, I think so. Unlike most people here, like my sources aren't from like the source. It's from like it's like from everybody else here or
Drake
from the members. Yeah, it's like I'm like removed from the origin. It's like it's like it's like a Michael Scott Wayne Gretzky situation.
That's a good one.
That's probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah. I think that's the best way I could put it because it's like, I didn't learn white socks and loafers from Ivy style, or I didn't learn tied sweaters and rugby.
I mean, to be fair, you're not alone. Most people are like that.
But
I mean, I mean, even me. But yeah, go ahead.
So it's kind of like I see it just as the clothes itself. I know we went over how like the whole thing about trying to remove the whole back in the day sort of ideals from
context
clothes.
Back in the day.
So I feel like that's like exactly what I incorporate wearing my clothes as Ivy inspired.
Because they weren't looking at inspo; they just wore it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of like
little did they know they were going to become inspo.
Yeah. So it's like the whole full circle sort of deal, right? It's like they wore it because that's just what they wore, and then it led to we wear this because heritage stuff or whatever.
What they wore.
And then someone tweeted out a picture of like a screenshot of like Ivy style, or like take Ivy, I mean. And it's like, imagine if you told this like now 90-year-old man, hey, people have been like obsessed with your pants for a decade. Like how ridiculous it sounds.
Yeah, he'd be like, shut up, get out of my face.
To be fair though, I mean, it's remember the Duke of Windsor was like a style icon too, and people obsessed over that.
Well, that's true, but it's like a difference between like the Duke of Windsor and like taking a picture of a
royal,
and basically like he didn't know the photo was being taken.
I guess my in my head it was more so like you are what the Duke of Windsor was to those people back like in the 30s. You are like that person, except you're a regular guy, right? Yeah, don't tell the doctor. It was a woman. But yeah, no, it's all about, I think the references part is interesting because that's, again, I saw Dick Carroll, Mark Cho take after that, right? And yeah, I mean they got it from the source, right? Because again, Dick Carroll is a huge Ivy head. Mark Cho has routinely, Taylor Cade, that's how he got in touch, and there's a lot of love for that kind of look and updating it. So like of course I saw it there. And then by extension, right, I can't forget to say like Matt and Chase of J Muser now, they both kind of were into that too, wearing white socks with stuff. And again, something that I'm kind of gathering is that we tend to do the references to those things by specific pieces. Like we're never going to do. I mean, sometimes we don't do the full look, right? Sometimes we do. Sometimes I try my best not to wear a navy jacket and chinos. Like I try, like that's a little too like George Michael kind of thing going on. If I'm gonna wear like a navy jacket, like today, right? I wore a navy jacket, black knit tie, but I'm wearing it with brown cords. Like that's a little bit like different. I mean, it's still pretty Ivy. People wore cords and navy jacket, but it's like it's like not a straightforward approach, right? Or the fact that and I'm sure Jason can say this, like the fact that you wear white socks in general points to Ivy style. Right, because like to us, like that's like what was so iconic, and other people might not recognize that, unfortunately, or we can't
or just not have thought of it.
Exactly. It's like for me, like again, like me wearing a rep stripe tie, no matter what, wearing it with a double-breasted suit, wearing it with a spear point collar, is me evoking that, whether it's heyday or pre-heyday Ivy, but when you look at the whole thing, you might not you might not be able to recognize the Ivy inspiration unless you are looking for it.
Well, and it's again, like
go ahead, Matt.
Those original sources are really important. Like my salesman head like turned on, and it's like kind of what Jason was saying. Like people tell him these colors don't work together, but he's like, no, motherfucker, I have these photos from like years ago of people successfully wearing it. So, and that's the reason we're doing it, because like it holds up. So like that's kind of why those are nice. I was like, oh, you can do this. You can like knock out those stupid arguments of people telling you can't wear that. So that's an instance where it does come in handy.
And even then, it's less about, because I think that, and this will go more into the Facebook thing in a second, but a lot of the bold choices that people do, I think one reason why people are so hesitant is because there is no precedent for it, like you said, right? And it doesn't have to be, because I think we talked about with Kyoshi, where like, oh, just because it was done back in those days doesn't make it good, which is a valid point. but it's the idea that, hey, someone did it before, so I'm just following in their footsteps. I don't care if it's bad or not, right? Like, I think, whenever I show people, I mean, a couple times this has happened in our Facebook group when people, like, when we wear white socks and like maybe a guy from Ivy Style or some random dude joins in, they're like, hey, why are you guys wearing white socks? And we'll show him a bunch of pictures from everybody. We're Cary Grant, fucking who's the fucking dancer? Gene Kelly wearing white socks. There's a bunch of examples out there, and it's that idea that, like, I don't care if you think it's bad or not, but these guys did it.
Yeah.
So
there's precedent on it.
Like, there's precedent. We're putting stock in it because we like what these guys did before. Doesn't have to be quote good or quote proper, but we're just kind of doing it, right? Like, it's like, it's like jazz. It's like you're following in the scales or any kind of art, right? Like, at the end of the day, you're kind of following what you enjoy, and making references to all those kind of things.
And this is a combo for another time, but it's important to make that eventual distinction and cutoff between just following hive mind blindly into what's been done, then what's doing now, and then also being able to have your own individuality and personal style and not just regurgitating things you see. But that's another topic.
I need to issue a quick correction. Baseball is not an Ivy sport. Of course, Take Ivy has a list of Ivy sports, and the list is American football, basketball, crew, and lacrosse. Baseball's not on the list.
Basketball is Ivy?
Yeah, basketball's
what about
That's
cricket?
Interesting. I didn't think that basketball.
Well, that's it for me.
So those are
I'm
the
Ivy now, guys.
How did we not think of rowing? Yeah. The obvious one.
Rowing Blazers.
We should I think
because crew refers to rowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and rugby. Yeah. Did we say that?
I don't. It's not on the list. Sorry.
Well,
shit. Oh well.
Before too long, because we do have like 35 minutes left. I want to get into the Facebook stuff and Christian's weird, esoteric beliefs. Real quick, I just want to say, but before that, obviously nowadays Ivy Style is becoming is bigger, and trad and everything. You got Rowing Blazers doing kind of like a street skate hype version of it. You got Drake's kind of doing a straightforward version of it, and it is a great, as we say here, it's as Aparoli says, over the years, Ivy for me went from the base to where you turn to when you need to dress safe. And I think that's kind of also for all of us, right? Like, I think when you do want to have a regular look, there's nothing wrong with a navy jacket. Doesn't have to be a blazer. OCBD, like knit tie. And that's also like how I get other people into it, because it's one of those things that, to us it's safe, but to other people it's still dressed up. I think that's one very important distinction to have. And one important thing about Ivy is that it is, like I said earlier, it is inherently vintage or quote, traditional compared to everything else. Because if you wanted to dress up nowadays, looking at Suit Supply and everything like that, you'd probably wear really slim jacket, spread collar shirt, and then like a kind of like a bold, some kind of bold striped tie or something like that. Like there's variations in hashtag menswear that kind of do it. And so Ivy is a great way to look dressed up, but at least from our point of view, lived in, kind of more casual, a little bit more understated, but the details are what make it interesting, as opposed to kind of following the norm. It's as we'll get into, it's unfortunate that there is the norm of Ivy Style, but Ivy is great in that kind of regard, that you can always kind of fall back into it, and it's a good base point. Like my friend Adam, he wants to get a navy jacket and a knit tie. He probably won't wear it with an OCBD, but he'll wear it with like a work shirt and kind of evoke that look. And he's also, I lent him my copy of Take Ivy. I've lent him my copy of Hollywood and the Ivy Look, and also the illustrated book of Ivy, which is another great Japanese resource. But yeah, Ivy's cool, and it's also great to see the Japanese people do it without the context, which we've kind of talked about before. But when you don't live with the WASP background, when you don't have that kind of like, oh well, this is proper, it really frees you up to kind of approach it the way we do, where kind of anything goes, right? And I think some of the best dressed people in the who do Ivy are often the ones who make references to it without following a uniform per se.
Right.